Have you ever tried so hard to let something go that it became the only thing you could think about? Maybe you've been there. It's 1 a.m., you're lying in bed staring at the ceiling, you need to be up at 7, tomorrow's coming quickly, you need to sleep, but your mind just won't let go. The harder you try to stop thinking, the louder it seems to become. Well, I've been there too. Recently, it was because I made the long and difficult decision to sever ties with somebody who I believed was not living up to my expectations of personal integrity. Instead of just letting it go, I found myself running every possible scenario over and over. I guess I wanted to convince myself that I was making the right decision, but I was tired and I needed to get to sleep. So I did what seemed reasonable at the time. I tried not to think about it, which, if you ever tried this, you already know it doesn't work. It becomes louder, more detailed. And it brings its friends. What if I did this? And what if I said that? By 1:30, I wasn't just thinking about the thing. I was thinking about the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about the thing. And I was thinking about the what ifs I did this or that, which somehow makes the whole letting go thing impossible. At some point, half annoyed and half amused, I remembered thinking, you're always talking about being the observer, not the thought. Why isn't it working for you now? That's why I thought this was a good topic to discuss. And perhaps this is the part nobody ever talks enough about. If you watched the last episode, or if you've tried mindfulness, meditation therapy, or any version of notice your thoughts, and you've had the experience of noticing the thought and still feeling completely stuck inside the thought pattern, well, this doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. In fact, I think it means that you ran into something very real, something worth understanding rather than pushing past. Here's the misunderstanding I had, and maybe you've had it too. I assumed that noticing a thought and controlling a thought were basically the same things. They were the same skill. That if I could just see it clearly enough, name it accurately enough, I'd get to decide whether it stayed or went. Well, that's not how it works. And there's a reason. Researchers have studied this directly. It's sometimes called the white bear effect, after an old experiment where people were told to think about anything they wanted except a white bear. Let's try it. Think about anything you like, but try not to think of a big furry white bear for the next few seconds. Simple, right? Just don't think of a big furry white bear. Okay, how did that go? Well, interestingly enough, the findings, again and again, is that actively trying to suppress a thought tends to backfire because the mind keeps checking whether it's succeeding, which means it has to keep the very thought it's trying to avoid active enough to monitor it. The effort to push it away is what keeps bringing it back. So at 1 a.m., the version of me trying to force the thought out of my head wasn't me failing at some skill I hadn't yet mastered. I was doing exactly what the research said will happen to anyone who tries that. That struggle isn't a sign of a flaw. Nothing's broken. It's the mechanism working exactly as it was built to work. So first, take this moment to thank your brain for working properly, because this reframes the question for us. It's not why can't I make this stop? It's what if stopping the thought was never actually the right plan of attack? Full disclosure, I don't have that fully worked out yet. And I'm not going to pretend I do in the next 60 seconds because I don't think it's a 60-second answer. But here's where I've landed on this topic. And it's enough to be useful, even half finished. Noticing a thought doesn't hand you a remote control. This technique doesn't come with an off switch. What it hands you is something quieter, the chance to stop wrestling with the thought long enough to decide how you want to respond to its presence. So here's what I'd like to leave you with today. Instead of a technique that promises to make the thought stop, because I know that promise would be dishonest, The next time you catch yourself trying to force a thought away, try loosening your grip instead of tightening it. Stop resisting the fact that the thought is present and literally say to yourself internally, okay, you can stay. Not because you like it and not because you agree with it, but because it's there, front and center. Just agree, you can stay. And I'm not going to fight you for this space, for this room. And that's it. No suppressing, no fixing, just permission for the thought to be present without you needing to win a fight against it. Some nights that's not going to feel like enough. I get that. It didn't work for me at 1:30 a.m. either. In fact, I eventually turned on one of the theta-infused binaural beat meditation soundtracks I used during my dissertation research, the same ones I've added as a full library here on my YouTube channel. And within minutes, I was out like a light. It's funny how a good night's sleep will reset your outlook. These soundtracks aren't something I reach for out of habit. I built and studied them formally as part of my doctoral research. And what I found again and again was that people who used them consistently came back describing real shifts in mood and outlook and how much lighter things felt. If you'd like to try them yourself, I've added a link to the full library in the show notes. But something actually did shift at night. The moment I stopped fighting the thoughts, they no longer needed to shout to be heard. So maybe it wasn't only the soundtrack that put me to sleep that night. Maybe it was finally giving myself permission to stop fighting what was already there. Hi, I'm Dr. James, and thank you for spending this time with me. If you're in the middle of thoughts you can't seem to escape, I won't tell you to fight them until they stop. I'm telling you the struggle itself may be what needs to stop. Growth doesn't end here. We'll go a little bit further next time. There's a lot more to unpack together. And when you're ready, your next step is waiting.